My mother and stepfather Gary bought the two-story house on Willow Grove Avenue the summer before I started fourth grade. The ground floor had enough bedrooms for my sister, stepsister, and I, while the upper level was dedicated entirely to an expansive master bedroom with a walk-in closet and private bathroom. The backyard was the largest I'd ever seen, with a treehouse, swimming pool, and plenty of lawn space. It was in all ways the perfect suburban family home. We had a small family gathering to celebrate the purchase of our new house, the first we'd owned since my mother and stepfather had married a year prior. We ate pizzas picnic style and blankets in our new empty living room with soda for the kids and alcohol for my parents, grandparents, aunt and uncle. Bored by the adult conversation, my sisters and I retreated upstairs with our toddler cousin to play in the master bedroom. My stepsister made a game of walking as far as she could on her palms in a handstand, while I made a game of tickling her until she collapsed into a giggling heap. Except the last time I did this, she collapsed on my cousin instead, pancaking him to the carpet where he began to bawl. My aunt, like any other overprotective first-time mother, came sprinting in at the sound of his distress, whisking him away downstairs. My sisters followed, energetically describing to the adults what had happened. I stayed right where I was, dreading what was coming next. But once all the crying and fussing from the living room quieted down, I made my way to the top of the stairs. Gary waited for me halfway up the steps, his hands outstretched to either banister. "So where do you think you're going?" he asked, his voice cold and flat. I knew enough about alcohol to recognize that he was drunk, even though he never stumbled or slurred like the comical drunks on TV. I'd seen him drink an entire pitcher of beer without any noticeable effect. He'd hit me before, this angry, unknowable man my mother allowed to take control of our lives the moment she and my father separated. Those previous episodes of spontaneous violence had no common cause, save for my saying, "I'm sorry." He was that breed of disciplinarian who invented new rules on the spot whenever he felt I required punishment, often without telling me what I'd done wrong. Sometimes I had to sit in a corner, sometimes I had to donate my toys to charity, and sometimes, when no one else was around and he'd had a little too much to drink, I took a shot to the face. This was the first time I saw it coming. I said, "Where do you think you're going?" And not waiting for an answer, Gary marched up the stairs. He prodded me across the bedroom floor until I was backed into the far corner of the walk-in closet, berating me about what a horrid, loathsome kid I was for doing something like that to a little boy. "How could you?" he demanded. I opened my mouth to say the only thing I could think to say. "I'm sorry." I didn't see him move. I just felt the force of the blow on the side of my face, followed by of my head bouncing off the wall. And then again. And again. I slumped to the floor, my mouth filling with blood. Sniffling and gulping, I tried to prevent any from spilling out. Absolutely certain he'd kill me if I bled on the new carpet. He thought I was crying. "Fucking baby," he spat, turning on his heel and heading back downstairs. I stayed hidden in the closet, swallowing my own blood, terrified of provoking further punishment by showing my face again. I believed him. I was a horrible, loathsome kid. Because he was an adult, and I was just a 9-year-old boy. Eventually, someone called up after me. I went downstairs in silence, avoiding eye contact, certain that everyone had been discussing what a bad kid I was. And in one sense or another, I remained hidden in that closet for a long time to come. We lived in that house for another 10 years, and for me, that was a decade spent in omnipresent fear. Gary continued periodically beating me after that, though those episodes became more infrequent as the years went on. I never spoke to my mother about it. Because she deferred to him on nearly all household matters, I believed he parented with her full knowledge and consent. Now overall, Gary preferred psychological abuse to physical in the forms of daily criticisms and comments about anything that caught his attention. My hair, my clothes, my interest in paleontology and science. Those few times I drummed up the courage to protest, he'd make the standard bully's excuses. It was only teasing. It's just a joke. You know, Matthew, you really need to develop a sense of humor. As a man who ran several miles every evening, he fancied himself an athlete and was openly frustrated by my absolute lack of interest in sports. His contempt displayed in the shake of a head or disdainful grunt whenever he saw me playing in the yard with my toy dinosaurs, instead of skinning my knees in a game of street football with the older boys up the block. The way, I was endlessly told, he did at my age. This was how life went. The criticisms, the arbitrary assertions of authority, the new chores for breaking household rules I didn't even know existed. He chronically cheated on my mother. Blatant, badly hidden affairs quietly swept under the rug by her aggressive denial mechanisms, even when the occasional STDs he brought home required us all to get vaccinations. Nothing wipes away the sting of a hepatitis inoculation, like a family trip to Disneyland immediately afterwards. My little sister he largely ignored, mercifully, and for her own reasons, my stepsister eventually decided she'd had enough of him and chose to go live full-time with her birth mother. After she left, his attention towards me increased exponentially. If he spotted me playing, well, there was always some new chore he felt I could be doing instead. Some new responsibility to fill my time with and shape my character. And sometimes, when no one else was around and he'd had a little too much to drink, I took a shot to the face. Being casually derided on a daily basis for my constant failure had the cumulative effect of convincing me that I was simply wrong. The wrong kind of boy, because I preferred to read science fiction novels and watch nature documentaries than play sports. My opinions would always be wrong. My clothing, wrong. My new haircut, wrong. Nothing I did could ever be right. I was defective, an aberration. I became one of those kids who never smiled in the presence of adults and preferred to play by himself behind closed doors. So I stayed in my room whenever I could, with my books and comics and other hobbies. When not there, the library or a museum. Different locales, but the same result. 4 walls, a ceiling, and a closed door. I never felt quite safe, but I felt hidden, where my wrongness could not attract attention, and with it, more pain. I merely substituted one closet for another. In high school, I excelled academically, if not socially. College was on the horizon, and with it, the chance to finally escape. So I kept my head down, diligently worked on my homework and university applications, and endured my daily torments. When a small creative writing program at a university upstate finally accepted me, I moved in as soon as student housing gave me my dorm assignment. By the beginning of sophomore year, I was flourishing. I had a good circle of friends, was living alone in my first apartment, and was writing several thousand words worth of short stories, poems, essays, plays, and scripts a week. There was a young woman who seemed to want a bit of my time. I've genuinely never been happier. I drove back home one late October weekend to pick up a few things I'd left behind while settling into my new apartment. My parents insisted I stay for dinner, wanting a nice family meal while I was in town. Just the 3 of us, since my little sister was out with her high school friends. I wanted to get back on the road as soon as possible, but no college fine arts student in history has ever turned down a free meal. Something seemed off during dinner. My parents were a little too focused on their actions, their small talk too deliberately nonchalant, as though I witnessed a rehearsed performance of some sort. Gary sipped his beer, his body language signaling an eagerness or expectancy that I couldn't decipher. When I rose to clear my plate, my mother seized it instead. There was always an ironclad rule in the house that every family member was responsible for his or her dishes. And this inexplicable violation of household protocol was my first warning that something was very wrong. Every well-honed instinct screamed at me to flee, but before I could contrive an excuse, my mother sat back down. "There's something we need to tell you," Gary said. "It's about your father." My father? My father had functionally abandoned my sister and I after the divorce in favor of a life with his new wife and child. He'd made so little impact on me that I could barely remember the man. "We've never been completely honest with you," he continued. "You're not really his son. You're mine." Mine. The word seared me like a brand. While Gary grinned with the delight of someone finally claiming a long-desired prize. My mother said nothing. He kept talking about his long-running affair with my mother, which incidentally had destroyed both of their previous marriages, about the accidental pregnancy and the anecdotal evidence proving I was his biological son, about all the various relatives and friends of the family who'd been aware for years. He blathered some nonsense about how this would free me from the pain of the divorce. I wasn't really listening. Too busy considering about how my stepsister and I were only 6 months apart in age and had been occasionally told how much we resembled each other. How this revelation meant that she and my little sister were both actually my half-sisters. And the most horrible truth of it, and the one which cut the deepest, was the realization that my childhood beliefs had been correct. I was wrong. I was a lie these people had created and conspired to keep secret, right down to the names on my birth certificate. I was a bastard's bastard. By the standards of decent behavior, I should not even exist. And because I did, I was punished for it. Well, Gary said after I didn't respond, what do you think about that, son? Here was a man who hadn't hesitated to bounce my head off a wall over a harmless childhood accident. Every day of my life, he punished me for failing to live up to his idea of who he thought his son should be. A decade of casual cruelty to someone he believed was his own flesh and blood. Even now, having grown up, off to adulthood, living my own life, he was hurting me for not being who he thought I should be. Since practically the moment I'd met him, disappointing him had meant pain, and disappointing him always would. When it turns out that you are the skeleton in the closet, when you are the family's deep, dark, ugly secret, home will never be anything other than a tomb. Nothing, not even love, can live there. Tombs are meant only for dead things. I'd been hiding in that upstairs closet in one form or another since I was 9 years old. Hell, the son of a bitch had put me in there. That way he always knew where I was. He sat there watching me, waiting for me to last give him the acknowledgement he desired. I opened my mouth to say the only thing I could think to say. Fuck this. I stood up from the table, walked out of the house and out of that closet without saying another word to either of them. And I never went